Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jamsey Online YouTube channel. Today, I figured I'd finally kind of give you guys a little bit of a shop tour and talk about some of the goals for the shop, for the channel, and everything moving forward. My dad is actually out in the field right now doing some of his farming. He's getting ready to plant corn. I figured we'd just start with the shop tour here, and I've had a lot of people asking that. I mean, you see all the machines in the videos, but you don't get a full view of them. When an engine comes into the shop, this is kind of the area of the shop that we would consider like the dirty area. Obviously, when things come in, it's greasy and oily and so on. So we've got the teardown cart here that you guys have seen us mount engines to so that we can roll them over and take the heads off, take the pistons out, and so on. We also have two spray cabinets. So this bigger one here is what we run any steel or cast iron parts in. It does run a caustic solution, so if you put aluminum in this machine, it will literally dissolve it. For the aluminum parts, we have the smaller spray cabinet over here, and it still has the caustic sticker on there, but we actually just run a strong detergent in this one, and that way we can run all of our smaller parts in this machine and any aluminum parts. You guys probably have seen me talk about the fact that the spray cabinets do pretty well, but they don't always do as well as we want them to. So we also have our industrial bake oven here, and basically it's just a giant oven for parts or engine parts, what have you. A couple manifolds in there right now that we're getting ready to clean up, and some valves it looks like. Again, you're usually running cast iron or steel parts in there. For instance, like an engine block, we can bake it at around 600 degrees for probably 4 to 6 hours, and that bakes off all of the paint, all of the grease, all of the oil, and dries everything out so that then we can move over into our glass bead cabinet. So this is just your regular old sandblast cabinet. We just happen to run glass bead instead of sand. We also have a steel abrader here, which is actually a steel shot machine. So on the inside here, it has a basket that we can put different parts in, or we can run some of these other baskets here. And what that does is it'll actually rotate through, it'll rotate the part. And as the part is rotating, there's also an impeller down in the bottom. And what it's doing is flinging these little tiny pieces of steel shot against the parts. And it abrasively cleans all of them. Cast iron cylinder heads do really well in the steel abrader here. Also crankshafts, if we're going to be grinding the crankshaft later on. Obviously you wouldn't want to put a crankshaft in there that you're not going to be grinding. Basically that's the first step in the process, and you guys know that we're pretty anal about our cleaning and everything because we just want to make sure that the parts are clean before we ever start working on them. That also helps with our inspection process, to be able to make sure that you can see any cracks, just anything that might be wrong with it. It's easier to do an inspection on a clean part. I guess I should also note the flywheel grinder also sits in this corner. That's pretty self-explanatory. The only reason it's over here is because it is a pretty messy machine. Leave that over here where it's a little bit further away from some of the cleaner areas of the shop. And I should note everything in here is disorganized and kind of a mess right now. I'm filming, actually there's a cylinder head on the ground over here that I'm getting ready to start on, which is a C12 Cat. So we'll have a video on rebuilding the head here, as well as putting new pin bushings in the connecting rods. Everybody likes that diesel stuff that's a little bit bigger. I'm also working on a set of 7.3 Power Stroke cylinder heads, doing a video, so those will be coming out in the near future. Just trying to get all the parts in and get things going. Moving over here, again, the bench is pretty much a mess here. This is kind of our cylinder head rebuilding area. This is basically just a giant belt sander. Back in the day, people actually resurfaced heads on these. That's kind of what they were sold to be able to do, but it does a terrible job. So the only thing we resurface on these is like exhaust manifolds. We just run it on there. As far as rebuilding our heads, we actually have two seat and guide machines. So this is the TCM 25 that my dad started with when he opened the shop in 1983. In 1983, this was kind of a top-of-the-line machine, but it just was showing his age. And I have actually an entire video on this machine, if you want to go check it out, talking about it. Bunch of pilots, some core drills and such for drilling out for valve guides. So we actually do use this machine mainly for valve guide work, as well as sometimes cutting counterbores for valve seats. That's what this tool is here. We actually adapted some of our SERDI tooling, the other machine, to fit on this machine so that we can cut our seat counterbores. That's the way my dad likes to do it because he's more familiar with the way this machine works. I like to actually cut them on the SERDI over here. The main difference between the two is that you mount your head on the table here on this machine, and it has an air float table. So basically the cylinder head moves relative to the valve guide tooling. When you move over here to the SERDI, it's kind of the opposite, where the head stays put, but basically the machine has built into it an air float that allows you to move over and get centered to do your machining on the valve seats. So we bought this machine in 2020. It's pretty much brand new to us still. Again, this is kind of one of the top of the line machines nowadays. The next step up from this machine would be a single point style tool. Basically, this machine is what you call a form tool machine. The way it works is you have these little inserts that go in and basically forms the valve seat to match the profile of the insert. This one actually needs sharpened a little bit. Multiple different angles there that'll cut the seat angle as well as your other angles all at the same time. The next step up from a machine like this is a single point machine. SERDI also sells one. It's called the SERDI Profile. There's also the Nguyen Contour. And what it does is it has a single point, and as the spindle raises up and down relative to the seat, it's also moving in or out to actually form the profile of the seat. They're pretty cool machines, but you're talking probably 3 times the cost for the base cost for the machine. So it gets pretty expensive. Those types of machines do a lot better in a shop where you're doing more R&D type stuff and experimenting with different profiles. What we're doing here is more of a rebuild situation, and it just doesn't make as much sense to spend that much money. Although in the future, it's kind of a maybe a pipe dream at this point, but it would be cool to have one. Over in the other corner there, we also have our Robbins valve seat, valve grinder. I'm like, my brain is not working. We bought this machine early 2020 as well. It's a good little machine. We've been pretty happy with it. As we move over this direction, this is kind of our area where we do cylinder head resurfacing, block resurfacing or decking, and boring the blocks as well as some of our connecting rod work. So this is our RMC 1000 boring and surfacing mill. Right now it has the surfacing head on it, and basically this again is a machine that, not a machine that my dad started with, but has probably had it 30 years or so at this point. So it's a very good machine, but it's still a manual machine. When you walk into a lot of shops nowadays, you're going to see a lot of CNC type equipment. So that is something that's kind of my goal, is that in the next 5 years or so, I can upgrade to a CNC style machine. But even so, we can still bore all the blocks on this. We can still surface heads. It's not quite big enough for some of the stuff that I want to be able to do, but it's a good machine, has a digital readout on it. Again, really great machine. It's just a little bit slower than some of the stuff you get nowadays. Moving on to some of the connecting rod stuff. This is our cap grinder that we use for grinding the connecting rods and the caps. Basically what that does is removes material from the mating surface so that we can then go back and bore or hone the rods out again, which is done on this machine. So this is our connecting rod hone. If you've walked into an automotive machine shop, you have probably seen one of these machines. Most shops are running a Sun-In connecting rod hone. There are some quick ways out there and maybe a couple other brands, but this is the machine you'll typically see. The nice thing about ours, we do have the power stroke attachment. So rather than always having to manually stroke the connecting rods on the mandrel, we can set it up to power stroke. So you just hit the pedal and it goes. This machine here that has some stuff piled up on it is our pin boring machine. That's the machine that we use to bore out connecting rod piston pins. Although we have started using our boring mill to do those rather than using this machine. I don't know how old this is, but it's pretty freaking old. I don't even know how to run that machine, honestly. That's usually what my dad does, but something I need to learn, I suppose. Once the blocks have been bored, obviously that's a roughing process. We still have to go in and finish the cylinders to have the proper piston to wall clearance, as well as the surface finish that you need for the rings to seat. So this is our Sunnen CV616. Again, it's a pretty good machine. It's manual. We run vitrified abrasives, which means they're more of a stone, almost like sandpaper, if you will. This is the machine that I would like to upgrade first before I upgrade anything else in the shop. The two options on the market are really either the Sunnen or the Rottler. If you watch some of the other YouTube channels, you may have seen some of the Rottler machines out there. This is a machine that I would really like to be able to upgrade in the next year or two, but we're talking easily $100,000, if not more, by the time you're tooled up. But it is one of my goals and something that I'm setting my sights on. So again, hone will be first, then we'll look into a CNC style block machine. Our race car used to be in here for the last 5 or 6 years. We actually just moved it out to the new shop that we'll go out to in here in a little bit. So this area already got filled with junk. We've got a couple cylinder heads here that either ended up with because the customer backed out or the customer abandoned them. So there's a couple things there. We've got our 2 welders. Obviously you guys know neither my dad nor I are welders, but we can stick metal together every once in a while. In the center here is the crankshaft grinder. It's a Burco RTM 270. Really good machine. Again, I think my dad has probably had this 30 years or so. He talks about when he bought it, there was no way he could ever afford it. It would never pay for itself, but it was either buy it so that we could be grinding cranks or pay for somebody else's machine by, outsourcing. So he didn't want to do that, ended up buying it, managed to get it paid off somehow, just like I'm going to be doing with the hone and the block machine someday. But this is, again, one of the only machines in the shop that I still have not learned how to run. And the reason being, it's an intense process, and it's something that requires some pretty extensive focus while you're running this machine so that you don't mess up. And we've just been so busy with everything that I've never had the time to learn. So that's, again, something that I need to do as soon as possible. On the back side of this wall is the office area, so that's pretty boring. We won't go over there. This is usually where we're doing our assembly. And now that we have the new shop out there, what I'd like to do is, it might end up being out there, but I'd like to close off another section of this and actually do an engine room, basically where it's a clean room that we're building engines in as opposed to having it all open. Assembling engines here, we have to be pretty careful about making sure we're not getting dust and dirt and grinding dust and so on into the engines as we're assembling them. Also have our DCB 750 crankshaft balancer over here. This machine we got a little over 2 years ago. It was used, but for the small amount of balancing that we do, it made sense for our budget and so on. That way we could, again, get into doing it ourselves and not have to outsource to the local competition. The only problem with this machine is when we bought it, it didn't have the drill press on the machine. So it's supposed to have a drill press that you can move and actually do your drilling to remove material right there on the machine. This one doesn't have it. This machine is actually a Fentech. It's branded as Sunnen here, but Fentech is the company who makes it. They do still sell the drill press attachments, but long story short, the amount of money they wanted for it didn't make sense to us with how much balancing we're not currently doing. Again, with the new shop, we need to do some reorganizing in here. There's a lot of stuff in here that is kind of personal as opposed to being business related that needs to go out to the other shop. So hopefully that'll happen over the next, year or so as we make time for it. Over here, this sad little machine is a RG35 surfacing mill. This used to be kind of the smaller machine that was always set up to surface cylinder heads. We started a rebuild on it 3 years ago now, or over 3 years ago. Pretty much everything on the machine was worn out. So we started to rebuild it and basically converted it over to a CBN style cutting head. It used to be actually a grinding machine, but now it's converted over. But it still needs some TLC And honestly, at this point, we're thinking of possibly selling this machine and just buying a new surfacer. Because again, it's a smaller machine. If we're going to be putting more money into it or getting something else, I'd like to get something that we can surface a little bit bigger heads on. So that's pretty much a rundown of the shop. Let's see, what are we, 36 by 48? I think it comes out to around 1,700 square feet. I'll throw up how many square feet it is because I can't do math in my head. But the other thing we have is the overhead crane. we still need to switch out the hoist because again, we rebuilt this budget hoist a little bit ago, and we like the budget more than we like the coughing hoist. We just haven't gotten around. We put this one up there so we could test it and make sure that it worked before we switched them out, and we just haven't gotten around to fully switching it out. But this is kind of a bridge crane. I don't know the crane terminology, but long story short, we can move that hoist back and forth to either side of the shop, and then the beam that the hoist is hanging from actually moves to both ends of the shop, just like we put in the new shop out there. But that's kind of the rundown on the tour that you guys have been asking for. Gives you an idea of what you've always seen, probably one or two machines in clips in the videos, but maybe this will give you kind of a more broad overview of what the shop is laid out like.